A limestone box surfaced in 2002. Carved into its side were 5 words that shook biblical archaeology. The object was a 1st-century Jewish bone box called an ossuary. It was used to hold the remains of the dead after decomposition. Thousands of ossuaries have been recovered from the Jerusalem area. They date to roughly 20 BCE to 70 CE. Most ossuaries are plain. Some carry names. This one carried a name that changed everything. The inscription reads in Aramaic, "James, son of Joseph, brother of Jesus." If authentic, it is the only known archaeological object that directly references Jesus of Nazareth by name from the 1st century. When the inscription was announced in October 2002, it became instant global news. Every major newspaper in the world ran the story on their front page. The announcement triggered immediate controversy. Scholars, theologians, and skeptics all demanded to examine the evidence firsthand. The discovery was first published by André Lemaire, a French epigrapher at the Sorbonne who specialized in ancient Semitic inscriptions and had decades of expertise reading 1st-century Aramaic text. Lemaire concluded the inscription was genuine. The lettering matched 1st-century Aramaic script precisely, but the ossuary had not come from a controlled archaeological excavation. It came from a private collector. Golan had been collecting antiquities since he was a teenager. His apartment was filled with thousands of objects. The owner was Oded Golan, an Israeli engineer and lifelong antiquities collector based in Tel Aviv. Golan said he purchased the ossuary from an Arab antiquities dealer in the 1970s. He claimed he never realized the significance of the inscription. That claim would become the central question of one of the longest archaeological fraud trials in history. The ossuary was displayed at the Royal Ontario Museum. Over 100,000 people came to see it. Then, the Israeli Antiquities Authority stepped in. In 2003, the IAA assembled a committee of experts to examine the inscription. Their conclusion was devastating for the ossuary's supporters. The committee said the first half was ancient, but the second half was added later by a modern forger. The committee identified what they called a difference in the patina between the 2 halves of the inscription. The first part had natural ancient patina in the carved grooves. The second part appeared to have patina that was artificially applied. Patina is the mineral crust that forms naturally on limestone over centuries of burial. It cannot be replicated quickly. Under magnification, the IAA committee said the patina in the second half looked different, smoother, more uniform, possibly applied with chalk paste dissolved in warm water. In 2004, Israeli police charged Oded Golan with forgery, fraud, and antiquities trafficking. What followed was one of the longest and most expensive trials in Israeli legal history. The trial lasted 7 years. Over 130 witnesses testified. The transcript exceeded 12,000 pages. The prosecution called geologists, chemists, epigraphers, and forensic experts. The defense called their own. Expert contradicted expert. Each side presented compelling evidence that directly opposed the other. The judge later wrote that he had never seen a case where qualified experts disagreed so completely on the same physical evidence. The core scientific dispute came down to one question. Was the patina in those carved letters natural or faked? The prosecution relied heavily on Yuval Goren, a geologist at Tel Aviv University. He testified that the patina in the second half of the inscription contained crushed chalk mixed with water applied over the carved letters to simulate age. Goren also found microfossils in the patina that he said were inconsistent with a Jerusalem burial cave environment. If the microfossils came from ocean-sourced chalk rather than local cave sediment, it would prove the patina was manufactured. The defense countered with Wolfgang Krumbein, one of the world's leading experts on stone biodeterioration. Krumbein testified the patina was genuine biogenic, varnish formed by centuries of microbial activity. He argued that cleaning the ossuary with modern detergents had damaged the original patina, which could explain the visual differences between the two halves of the inscription. The cleaning argument was significant. Golan admitted he had scrubbed the ossuary before its publication. If cleaning removed more patina from one section, the difference could be a cleaning artifact, not evidence of forgery. The shallower second half of the inscription would lose its patina more easily during cleaning than the deeper first half. The scientific community was genuinely split. This was not a fringe debate. International conferences devoted entire sessions to the ossuary debate. Careers were built and damaged by it. Over 40 peer-reviewed papers have been published on this single artifact across multiple disciplines. No other ossuary in the entire history of archaeology has received anywhere near this level of sustained scientific scrutiny and debate. Then in 2012, the judge delivered his verdict, and it surprised almost everyone. Judge Aharon Farkash acquitted Oded Golan on all forgery charges. The judge explicitly stated that the acquittal did not mean the inscription was authentic. It meant the prosecution failed to prove it was fake beyond a reasonable doubt. That distinction matters. The court did not declare the ossuary genuine. It declared the case unproven. Golan walked free after 7 years of prosecution. He maintained his innocence throughout. The verdict divided the archaeological community even further. Neither side accepted the result as definitive. Supporters said the acquittal proved the inscription was real. Critics said it only proved the prosecution was weak. From announcement to acquittal, the James Ossuary consumed a decade of archaeological debate. But the science did not stop with the trial. New analyses have continued ever since. In 2014, a new study examined the oxygen isotope ratios inside the patina covering the inscription. The oxygen isotope ratios were consistent across the entire inscription. Both halves showed the same geological signature from the same burial environment. If the second half had been carved recently and fake patina applied, the isotope ratios would reflect modern atmospheric conditions rather than ancient burial cave chemistry. The isotope data favored authenticity. But a single study does not close the case. Separate teams continued to debate the epigraphy itself. Does the handwriting change between the two halves? Some epigraphers see a clear shift in letter style at the midpoint. Others see natural variation consistent with a single carver working on rough limestone with a simple iron tool. Carving on limestone is not like writing on paper. The grain of the stone affects every stroke. Tool mark analysis showed that the entire inscription was carved with the same type of iron implement, consistent with first-century tools. Modern power tools leave distinctive marks that are absent from the James ossuary carving entirely. Even if the entire inscription is authentic, there is a probability question that cannot be ignored. James, Joseph, and Jesus were among the most common male names in first-century Judea. A statistical analysis estimated that multiple families in Jerusalem could have matched all three names simultaneously during that period. Thousands of ossuaries were produced in the Jerusalem region during this narrow time window. But the counter-argument is that brother identifications on ossuaries are extremely rare. Out of hundreds of inscribed ossuaries, only a handful mention a brother. You identify someone by their brother only if the brother is famous enough for everyone to recognize the reference. The inclusion of brother of Jesus implies that this Jesus was well known. Otherwise, why mention him? In first-century burial practice, mentioning a brother meant that brother was famous enough to identify the family. That is the strongest argument for connecting this ossuary to the biblical James. The New Testament and the Jewish historian Josephus both independently identify a person called James, who was the brother of Jesus. The historical existence of this individual is well documented outside the ossuary entirely. Josephus recorded that James was executed in 62 CE. That date falls within the ossuary production window. The question was never whether James existed. The question is whether this particular box held his bones. There are three possibilities, and the evidence does not definitively eliminate any of them. The inscription could be entirely genuine and refer to the biblical James. The second half could be a modern forgery added to an otherwise authentic ancient box. Or the entire inscription could be authentic but refer to a completely different family that happened to share the same three extremely common names. The ossuary is currently in a private collection. Golan retained possession after the acquittal. There is one test that could potentially resolve the dispute, and it has never been performed. Ancient DNA extraction from any bone residue remaining inside the ossuary could potentially identify the individual buried in it. If mitochondrial DNA could be recovered and compared against any other first-century samples from the Jerusalem area, it would add a biological dimension that currently does not exist in this debate. The technology exists today. Ancient DNA has been extracted from far older and more degraded materials. The Dead Sea Scrolls yielded DNA from their animal skin parchment. The technology is proven for this time period and region, but DNA would only identify the person inside the box. It would not prove the inscription's authenticity. Even a positive DNA result would face the same provenance problem. Without the original burial location, context is lost. The evidence sits precisely on the boundary between proven and unproven. Every new analysis has added complexity rather than resolution. The James ossuary belongs to a category of objects that exist in a permanent state of scientific uncertainty, not debunked, not confirmed, suspended between the two. 5 Aramaic words carved into limestone, the most debated inscription in modern archaeology, and still no consensus after more than 2 decades of testing and argument. If the inscription is authentic, it is the closest any archaeological object has ever come to the historical Jesus. If it is a forgery, it is one of the most sophisticated in the history of biblical archaeology. A forger would need expert knowledge of first-century Aramaic, access to authentic limestone, and the ability to create patina that matches ancient burial cave chemistry at the isotope level. 20 years of analysis, 7 years of trial, millions of dollars in legal costs, and the 5 words carved into the side of this limestone box still have no definitive verdict. The ossuary is real. The first half of the inscription is real. The second half is the question. And until someone performs the DNA test that has never been attempted, the case stays open. 5 letters, 1 name, the most consequential archaeological question of the 21st century. If this story fascinated you, subscribe. The evidence never stops speaking.